The military hospital in Virginia Beach buzzed with its usual morning activity, but room 312 remained eerily quiet. Inside, Staff Sergeant Marcus Rivera lay motionless on the hospital bed, his dark eyes fixed on the ceiling tiles above. 3 weeks had passed since the helicopter crash in Afghanistan. 3 weeks since his world had turned upside down. Marcus was a Navy SEAL, part of an elite unit that had completed some of the most dangerous missions in recent military history. His body bore the scars of countless operations, but the injuries from the crash were different. His left leg was shattered in multiple places, held together by metal rods and screws. Shrapnel had torn through his shoulder, and a deep gash across his forehead served as a constant reminder of that terrible night. But the physical wounds were nothing compared to what ate away at his soul. Marcus was the only survivor of his 6-man team. The faces of his fallen brothers haunted his dreams. Their voices echoed in his mind during the long, sleepless nights. Guilt consumed him like a poison, making him question why he deserved to live when they did not. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the head of the trauma unit, had tried everything to get Marcus to cooperate with his treatment. She was a skilled surgeon with over 15 years of experience treating wounded warriors, but Marcus presented a challenge unlike any she had faced before. He refused physical therapy, barely ate the meals brought to his room, and responded to medical questions with single-word answers or complete silence. "He's giving up," Dr. Mitchell told the nursing staff during their morning briefing. "We've seen this before with soldiers who've lost their entire unit. With findings, the survivor's guilt can be overwhelming. He needs specialized care, someone who understands what he's going through." The other nurses in the room exchanged worried glances. They had all tried to connect with Marcus, offering kind words, sharing stories, even bringing him books and magazines. Nothing worked. He remained locked in his own private hell, pushing away anyone who tried to help. "What about the new nurse?" suggested Janet, one of the veteran nurses. "The one who started yesterday. She has military background, doesn't she?" Dr. Mitchell nodded. Elena Rodriguez, former Army medic, served 2 tours in Iraq before going to nursing school. She's assigned to the surgical ward. But maybe we should have her try with Sergeant Rivera. Elena Rodriguez was indeed different from the other nurses. At 32, she carried herself with the confident posture of someone who had seen combat. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her brown eyes held a depth that spoke of experiences beyond her years. She had joined the civilian medical field after leaving the Army, driven by a desire to continue helping soldiers, even if in a different capacity. When Dr. Mitchell approached Elena about taking on Marcus as a patient, she accepted without hesitation. She had heard about the difficult SEAL who refused treatment, and something about his story resonated with her own experiences. Elena knew what it was like to lose people in combat, to carry the weight of survival when others didn't make it home. That afternoon, Elena entered room 312 for the first time. Marcus didn't acknowledge her presence, his gaze remaining fixed on the window, where autumn leaves drifted past. She began her routine checks, monitoring his vitals and examining his wounds with practiced efficiency. "Your shoulder is healing well," Elena said softly, her voice carrying a slight accent from her childhood in Texas. "The surgeon did excellent work. You'll regain full mobility with proper therapy." Marcus said nothing. Elena continued her assessment, noting the muscle atrophy in his injured leg and the tension in his jaw that suggested chronic pain. She had read his file thoroughly and knew about his unit's classified missions, though the details remained heavily redacted. What she did know was that he had been part of SEAL Team 6, an elite counterterrorism unit that operated in the darkest corners of the world. "I'm Elena Rodriguez," she said, pulling up a chair beside his bed. "I'll be taking care of you from now on." Still no response. Elena studied his face, noting the premature lines around his eyes and the haunted expression that never seemed to fade. She recognized the look. She had seen it in her own mirror during the dark months after her deployment ended. "You know," she said, settling back in her chair, "I served in Fallujah back in 2006. Lost some good people there. Learned that sometimes the hardest part isn't the fighting, it's coming home." For the first time, Marcus's eyes shifted slightly in her direction, though he didn't turn his head. Elena spent the next hour completing her nursing duties, checking his medication schedule and updating his charts. She worked in comfortable silence, not pushing for conversation but maintaining a calm, steady presence. When she finished, she stood to leave but paused at the door. "I'll be back this evening for the night shift," she said. "Try to eat something. Your body needs fuel to heal." Over the following days, Elena established a routine with Marcus. She would arrive for her shifts, complete her medical tasks, and spend time sitting quietly in his room. Sometimes she would read aloud from newspapers or books. Other times she would simply work on paperwork while keeping him company. She never pushed for responses, never tried to force him to talk about his feelings or his trauma. Marcus began to observe Elena more closely, noting things about her that the other medical staff had missed. The way she moved with military precision, how she instinctively scanned rooms upon entering, the small scar on her left hand that looked like it came from shrapnel. He realized she wasn't just another civilian nurse trying to understand something beyond her experience. She had been there, in the heat of combat, and had made it home with her own invisible wounds. One evening, as Elena was adjusting his IV line, Marcus finally spoke. "What unit?" His voice was hoarse from disuse, barely above a whisper. Elena looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time. "Army Combat Medical Specialist, 1st Infantry Division. You? SEAL Team 6. The words came out flat, emotionless. Elena nodded, showing no surprise or awe at the revelation of his elite status. "Good unit. Heard you guys do important work." Marcus almost smiled at her understated response. Most people reacted to SEAL Team 6 with either hero worship or fear. Elena treated it like any other job, which somehow made it easier for him to talk. "Did important work," he corrected. "Past tense." "Why past tense?" Elena asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hands clenching and unclenching on the hospital blanket. "Because they're all dead. My whole team. 6 good men, who trusted me to lead them home." Elena set down her medical supplies and pulled the chair closer to his bed. "What happened?" The question hung in the air between them. Marcus had been asked this countless times by investigators, psychiatrists, and commanding officers. He had given the technical details, the facts as recorded in official reports, but he had never talked about the human cost, the emotional weight of that night. "We were coming back from a classified operation," Marcus began slowly. "Can't talk about the mission details. But it went well. Clean extraction, no casualties. We were 20 minutes out from base when the helicopter went down." Elena listened without interrupting, her experience as a combat medic telling her when to stay silent and let someone process their trauma. "Engine failure," Marcus continued. "Pilot did everything he could, but we hit hard. I woke up 3 hours later, hanging upside down in my harness. The bird was on fire, and everyone else was." He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "You tried to save them," Elena said. "It wasn't a question." Marcus nodded, tears forming in his eyes for the first time since the accident. "I got Tom out first. Tom Brennan, our demolitions expert. But he was already gone. Then Jake, our sniper. Danny, our communications guy. Luis, our point man. And finally, Commander Hayes, our team leader. All dead. All on my watch." Elena reached over and gently placed her hand on his arm. "It wasn't your fault. I was second in command," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "I should have done something, seen it coming, made different decisions. These men had families, children. Tom's wife is pregnant with their first kid. Jake was supposed to get married next month. And they're dead because I failed them." The dam had finally broken, and years of suppressed emotion poured out of Marcus like water through a burst pipe. Elena sat with him as he cried, not offering empty platitudes or false comfort, but simply being present for his pain. When the tears finally stopped, Marcus felt both empty and strangely relieved. For the first time since the crash, he had shared the burden he had been carrying alone. "In Iraq," Elena said quietly, "I lost a patient, young Marine, couldn't have been more than 19, took shrapnel to the abdomen during a firefight. I worked on him for 2 hours, did everything by the book, everything I had been trained to do. But I couldn't save him. Marcus turned to look at her, seeing his own pain reflected in her eyes. For months, I replayed that day over and over. Elena continued, wondering what I could have done differently, what I missed, how I failed him. It nearly destroyed me, until my sergeant pulled me aside and told me something I'll never forget. What did he say? He said that in war, death comes for good people and bad people alike. It doesn't care about rank or skill or how much someone wants to live. All we can do is our best with the hand we're dealt, and honor the fallen by continuing to live and serve. Marcus absorbed her words, feeling a small crack in the wall of guilt and self-blame that had imprisoned him. Your brothers knew the risks when they signed up, Elena added. They trusted you to lead them, and you did. What happened to that helicopter wasn't combat, wasn't tactics or leadership. It was a mechanical failure, an act of chance that no amount of training or experience could have prevented. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt a glimmer of something other than despair. It wasn't hope. Not yet. But it was a recognition that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to carry this burden alone. Elena stood up and gathered her supplies. I'll be back tomorrow. Think about what I said. As she reached the door, Marcus called out to her. Elena, she turned back. Thank you, he said simply. She smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from any of the hospital staff. Get some rest, Marcus. Tomorrow we start working on getting you back on your feet. That night, Marcus slept without nightmares for the first time since the crash. When Elena arrived for her next shift, she found him sitting up in bed, having eaten his breakfast for the first time in weeks. Ready to start physical therapy? She asked. Marcus looked down at his damaged leg, then back at Elena. I don't know if I can do this. You don't have to do it alone, Elena replied. I'll be here every step of the way. And so began Marcus's long journey back from the brink of despair. With Elena's steady support and her understanding of what he had experienced, he slowly began to reclaim pieces of himself that he thought were lost forever. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with setbacks and challenges. But for the first time since the crash, Marcus believed it might be possible to find a reason to keep going. Elena Rodriguez had become more than just his nurse. She was a lifeline, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope could still take root and grow. The physical therapy room at the military hospital was a place of both hope and frustration for Marcus Rivera. 2 months had passed since Elena Rodriguez had first walked into his life and convinced him to start the long process of healing. Now, as he struggled to take his first steps with the parallel bars, sweat poured down his face, and his injured leg screamed in protest. Take it slow, Elena encouraged from beside him, her hands ready to catch him if he fell. Your leg is still learning how to bear weight again. Marcus gritted his teeth and forced himself to take another step, then another. The metal rods and screws in his leg felt foreign, like mechanical parts that didn't quite belong in his body. Each movement sent sharp pains shooting through his bones, but he pushed forward, driven by a determination that had been absent for weeks after the crash. That's enough for today, said Dr. Patricia Walsh, the physical therapist assigned to Marcus's case. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had worked with hundreds of wounded soldiers over the years. You've made excellent progress. 3 weeks ago, you couldn't even sit up without assistance. Marcus carefully lowered himself into the wheelchair that had become his temporary mode of transportation. His body was exhausted, but his mind felt clearer than it had in months. The fog of grief and guilt was still there, but Elena's constant presence and encouragement had helped him begin to see past it. As Elena wheeled him back to his room, they passed other patients in various stages of recovery. Some were missing limbs. Others bore the invisible wounds of traumatic brain injury. Marcus had begun to notice these fellow warriors more acutely now that he was emerging from his own darkness. Their struggles reminded him that he wasn't alone in his fight to reclaim his life. You're thinking about something, Elena observed as they entered his room. She had become skilled at reading his moods and expressions over the past few weeks. The other patients, Marcus replied, settling back into his bed. Some of them have been here for months, some for over a year. I keep wondering what separates the ones who make it all the way back from the ones who get stuck. Elena pulled up the familiar chair beside his bed and considered his question. I think it's different for everyone. Some people have strong family support. Others find purpose in helping fellow veterans. Some discover new dreams to replace the ones they lost. What about you? Marcus asked. What kept you going after Iraq? Elena was quiet for a moment, her fingers absently tracing the small scar on her left hand. Honestly, it was the patients I couldn't save that motivated me to become a better healer. I went back to school, became a nurse, and promised myself I would never give up on someone the way I almost gave up on myself. Marcus studied her face, noting the strength behind her gentle demeanor. Over the weeks, he had learned bits and pieces of Elena's story. She had grown up in a military family, lost her father in Somalia when she was 12, and joined the army at 18 with dreams of making a difference. Her deployment to Iraq had tested those ideals, but instead of breaking her, it had refined her purpose. I've been thinking about what comes next, Marcus said. The doctors say I'll never be fit for active duty again. 20-year career. Gone just like that. That must be terrifying, Elena replied. The military was your whole life. Marcus nodded. Since I was 18, I don't know how to be anything else. Don't know what I'm good at besides killing bad guys and protecting my team. You're good at leadership, Elena pointed out. You're good at making difficult decisions under pressure. You're good at inspiring loyalty and trust. Those skills don't disappear just because you can't run 10 miles with a full pack anymore. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Dr. Mitchell entered, followed by a tall man in navy dress uniform. Marcus immediately recognized the insignia of a SEAL commander, and his posture straightened instinctively. Sergeant Rivera, Dr. Mitchell said, this is Commander James Patterson. He'd like to speak with you. Elena started to leave, but Commander Patterson gestured for her to stay. Please. Remain. What I have to say isn't classified, and I understand you've been instrumental in Marcus's recovery. The commander pulled up another chair and sat down, his bearing formal but his expression compassionate. Marcus, I knew your team leader, Commander Hayes. We went through Bud's training together 15 years ago. He was a good man and a hell of a SEAL. Marcus felt his throat tighten at the mention of his fallen commander. Yes, sir. The best. I've read the after-action reports from your final mission, Commander Patterson continued. What you and your team accomplished that night was extraordinary. The intelligence you gathered has already led to significant operational successes. You saved American lives, Marcus. But my team is dead, sir, Marcus replied, his voice barely steady. Commander Patterson leaned forward. And that's a tragedy that will stay with you forever. But it doesn't diminish what you accomplished, or who you are as a warrior. Hayes wrote a letter before that final mission. A letter he asked me to deliver to you if anything happened to him. The commander reached into his jacket and withdrew a sealed envelope. Marcus's hands shook as he took it, recognizing his commander's handwriting on the outside. Take your time, Commander Patterson said. I'll wait. Marcus opened the envelope with trembling fingers and unfolded the single page inside. Elena watched as his eyes moved across the words, seeing tears form as he read. Would you like me to leave? Elena asked softly. Marcus shook his head and began to read aloud, his voice thick with emotion. Marcus, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened and I didn't make it home. I want you to know that serving alongside you has been one of the greatest honors of my career. Your courage, your tactical brilliance, and your unwavering loyalty to the team made you the finest second-in-command I ever had. I know you, brother. I know you'll blame yourself for whatever happened to us. I know you'll carry the weight of our deaths, like it was your responsibility. I'm writing this to tell you that you're wrong. Every man on this team volunteered to be here. We all knew the risks. And we all trusted you to lead us through the darkness. Whatever happened, whatever circumstances led to this letter being delivered, know that we faced it together as brothers, with no regrets. Your mission now is to live, Marcus. Live for all of us. Find a new purpose, a new way to serve. The world still needs warriors, even if they don't all carry guns. Take care of the wounded. Teach the next generation. Protect the innocent, in whatever way you can. Don't let our sacrifice be meaningless by giving up on yourself. We died serving something greater than ourselves. Now you must live, serving that same ideal. Your brother always, David Hayes. By the time Marcus finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Elena reached over and gently squeezed his hand, offering silent support as he processed the words of his fallen commander. Commander Patterson cleared his throat and spoke again. Marcus, the Navy wants to offer you a position. Not active duty, but something where your skills and experience can continue to make a difference. Marcus looked up, confusion replacing the grief on his face. What kind of position, sir? Instructor at the Special Warfare Center. Teaching tactics and leadership to the next generation of SEALs. It would mean staying at Coronado, working with candidates going through BUD/S training. The offer hung in the air like a lifeline. Marcus had never considered teaching, but as he thought about it, he realized it made sense. Who better to prepare young warriors for the realities of special operations than someone who had lived through its darkest moments? I don't know if I'm ready, sir, Marcus admitted. I'm still learning how to walk again. That's exactly why you'd be perfect for the job, Commander Patterson replied. These kids need to see what real resilience looks like. They need to understand that being a warrior isn't just about physical strength. It's about mental toughness. About getting back up when life knocks you down. Elena felt a surge of excitement for Marcus. This could be exactly what he needed, a way to honor his fallen brothers while building a new life for himself. Think about it, the commander said, standing up. There's no pressure, no timeline. Focus on your recovery first. But know that when you're ready, your Navy family is waiting for you. After Commander Patterson left, Marcus and Elena sat in contemplative silence. The weight of possibility filled the room, mixing with the ever-present grief to create something that might eventually become hope. What do you think? Elena asked finally. Marcus reread Hayes's letter, focusing on the words about finding a new way to serve. I think maybe Hayes knew me better than I knew myself. Maybe this is what he meant about living for all of them. It sounds like an incredible opportunity, Elena said. Teaching, mentoring, making sure future SEALs are prepared for whatever they'll face. I'll have to learn how to be a teacher, Marcus mused. That's not exactly something they cover in SEAL training, Elena smiled. Good thing you'll have time to figure it out. Your physical therapy is going to take months, maybe longer. Plenty of time to prepare for your new mission. Over the following weeks, the idea of becoming an instructor began to take root in Marcus's mind. He threw himself into physical therapy with renewed vigor, driven not just by the desire to walk again, but by the possibility of having a meaningful future. Elena was there for every session, offering encouragement and celebrating each small victory. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday afternoon in November. Marcus had been working on walking without assistance for weeks, managing only a few steps at a time before his leg would give out. But on this day, something clicked. The pain was still there, but it felt manageable. His balance was steady, his confidence growing with each step. Elena watched from across the physical therapy room as Marcus walked the entire length of the parallel bars unassisted. When he reached the end and turned around with a triumphant grin, she felt tears of joy streaming down her face. I did it, Marcus called out, his voice filled with a happiness that had been absent for so long. I actually did it. Elena ran to him, her professional composure forgotten in the moment. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him in a fierce hug. Marcus wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as the weight of months of struggle and determination culminated in this single, perfect moment. Dr. Walsh approached them with a clipboard and a broad smile. Congratulations, Marcus. I think we can officially graduate you from the parallel bars to independent walking with a cane. As Elena and Marcus separated, both slightly embarrassed by the spontaneous display of affection, Marcus realized that somewhere during his recovery, his feelings for Elena had evolved beyond gratitude. She had become his anchor, his motivation, and increasingly, the center of his world. But there was a complication neither of them had acknowledged. Military regulations were strict about relationships between patients and medical staff. Elena's professional ethics demanded that she maintain appropriate boundaries, even as her own feelings for Marcus had grown deeper with each passing day. The tension between their growing attraction and their respective duties would soon force them to confront questions that could change both their futures. As Marcus prepared to take his next steps, both literally and figuratively, they would have to decide whether their connection was worth the risks it might entail. Spring had arrived in Virginia Beach, bringing with it new life and the promise of fresh beginnings. Marcus Rivera stood at the window of his hospital room, no longer confined to a wheelchair or dependent on parallel bars for support. The cane in his right hand was his only concession to the injuries that had once threatened to end not just his career, but his will to live. 5 months had passed since Elena Rodriguez had first walked into his room and challenged him to find a reason to keep fighting. Now, as he prepared for his discharge from the military hospital, Marcus felt a complex mixture of excitement and anxiety about the future that lay ahead. The teaching position at the Special Warfare Center in Coronado had been officially confirmed. In 6 weeks, he would begin his new career as an instructor, sharing his knowledge and experience with the next generation of SEAL candidates. The Navy had provided him with a generous transition period to complete his physical rehabilitation and prepare for his new role. But there was one aspect of his recovery that remained unresolved. One relationship that had become increasingly complicated as his discharge date approached. His feelings for Elena had grown stronger with each passing day, and he was certain she felt the same way. The touches that lingered a moment too long, the way her eyes lit up when she saw him, the comfortable silences they shared all pointed to a connection that went far beyond the professional relationship between nurse and patient. Yet neither of them had acknowledged these feelings openly. Military protocol and medical ethics created barriers that seemed insurmountable, leaving them trapped in a situation where their hearts pulled them together, while their duties demanded they remain apart. Elena arrived for her morning rounds, her usual professional demeanor intact, but Marcus could see the sadness in her eyes. His discharge was scheduled for the following day, which meant this would be one of their last official interactions. "How are you feeling about tomorrow?" she asked, checking his chart and avoiding direct eye contact. "Ready," Marcus replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "The apartment near the base is all set up, and I've got my plane tickets to Coronado for next month." Elena nodded, making notations on his medical records. "Dr. Mitchell wants to see you one more time before you leave. Just a final assessment to make sure you're ready for the transition to outpatient care." "Elena," Marcus said, catching her hand as she reached for her supplies. "We need to talk." She looked down at their joined hands, her professional training warring with her personal desires. "Marcus, you know we can't. Not while you're still my patient. It wouldn't be appropriate." "Then let's talk about it tomorrow," he said. "After I'm officially discharged. After I'm no longer your patient." Elena pulled her hand away gently but firmly. "And then what? You'll be in California. I'll be here. We'll be a continent apart." "I could ask for a transfer," Marcus said. "The Navy has medical facilities in California. You could." "I can't ask you to rearrange your new career for me," Elena interrupted. "This teaching position is exactly what you need right now. A chance to honor your fallen brothers. To find new purpose. I won't be the reason you give that up." Marcus felt frustration building in his chest. After everything they had been through together, after all the walls they had helped each other break down, it seemed cruel that regulations and distance might keep them apart. "There has to be a way," he said. "What we have doesn't come along every day." Elena's professional mask slipped for a moment, revealing the pain she had been hiding. "Do you think this is easy for me? Do you think I don't feel the same way? But I became a nurse to help people, to honor the promise I made after Iraq. I can't compromise my ethics or my career, even for you." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices and the sound of medical equipment being rushed toward the emergency wing drew their attention. Elena's training kicked in immediately, her personal concerns set aside as she focused on potential medical emergencies. "I should check on that," she said, gathering her supplies quickly. "Elena, wait," Marcus called after her, but she was already hurrying toward the door. "We'll finish this conversation later," she said without turning around. But later never came. Elena was pulled into an emergency surgery that lasted well into the evening. And when her shift finally ended, Marcus had already been moved to the pre-discharge wing of the hospital. Their final official interaction consisted of nothing more than a brief exchange of paperwork and medical instructions, conducted with painful formality in the presence of other medical staff. The next morning, Marcus gathered his few personal belongings and prepared to leave the place that had been both his prison and his salvation for the past 6 months. As he waited in the lobby for his transportation, he found himself hoping Elena would appear for one last goodbye. But the minutes ticked by, and she remained conspicuously absent. "Doctor," Mitchell approached with his final discharge papers and a warm smile. "How are you feeling about heading back to the world?" "Nervous," Marcus admitted. "This place has been my whole world for so long. It's strange to think about being a civilian again, even temporarily." "You're going to do great things as an instructor," Dr. Mitchell assured him. "Those young SEALs will be lucky to learn from someone with your experience and perspective." As Marcus signed the last of his paperwork, Dr. Mitchell hesitated before speaking again. "You know, Elena requested a transfer yesterday. She's been accepted to a position at the VA hospital in San Diego. Apparently, she's interested in specializing in combat trauma rehabilitation." Marcus looked up sharply, his heart racing. San Diego was just a few hours south of Coronado. "When does she start?" "Next month," Dr. Mitchell replied with a knowing smile. "Funny coincidence, isn't it?" Before Marcus could respond, his ride arrived a Navy van that would take him to the airport for his flight to temporary lodging in California. As he gathered his belongings and prepared to leave, Dr. Mitchell handed him one final item. "Elena asked me to give you this," she said, pressing a small envelope into his hand. "She said you'd understand when to open it." Marcus pocketed the envelope, his mind racing with possibilities. As the van pulled away from the military hospital, he watched the building disappear behind him, carrying with it memories of the darkest and brightest chapters of his life. The flight to California gave Marcus time to reflect on everything that had changed since that terrible night in Afghanistan. 6 months ago, he had been a broken man, with no hope and no future. Now, he was embarking on a new career with a renewed sense of purpose. The transformation hadn't been easy, and it wouldn't have been possible without Elena's unwavering support and understanding. Upon arriving at Coronado, Marcus was greeted by Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, the officer responsible for new instructor integration. She was a compact woman with sharp eyes and an efficient manner that reminded him of many of the female warriors he had served alongside. "Welcome to the Special Warfare Center, Marcus," she said, shaking his hand firmly. "We're honored to have you joining our team." As she drove him around the base, pointing out facilities and explaining his new responsibilities, Marcus felt a sense of homecoming. The sight of young SEAL candidates running on the beach, the sound of instructors pushing them to their limits, the atmosphere of controlled chaos that defined special operations training, all of it felt familiar and right. "You'll be working primarily with Phase 2 candidates," Lieutenant Commander Chen explained. "Teaching small unit tactics, leadership under pressure, and decision-making in high-stress environments. Your real-world experience will be invaluable to these young warriors." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. These weren't just students. They were future SEALs who might one day face the same dangers and make the same sacrifices as his fallen brothers. The quality of his instruction could literally mean the difference between life and death for them. That evening, alone in his temporary quarters, Marcus finally opened the envelope Elena had left for him. Inside was a single piece of paper with a short message written in her careful handwriting. "Marcus, by the time you read this, you'll be starting your new life in California. I want you to know how proud I am of the man you've become, and how honored I was to be part of your journey back from the darkness. I've made a decision that might surprise you. I've accepted a position at the VA hospital in San Diego, specializing in combat trauma rehabilitation. I told myself it was for my career. But the truth is simpler. I can't imagine my life without you in it. I know we face challenges, distance, regulations, and the complexity of building a relationship after everything we've been through. But I also know that what we have is worth fighting for. You taught me that sometimes the greatest victories come after the hardest battles. When you're ready, when you've settled into your new role and found your footing as an instructor, I'll be here. Not as your nurse, not bound by professional protocols, but as a woman who cares deeply about the man who refused to give up, even when giving up seemed like the only option. Take your time. Learn to be a teacher. Honor your brothers by preparing the next generation of warriors. And when you're ready to start the next chapter of your personal life, remember that I'll be waiting. With all my love, Elena, P.S. The secret code your unit used for emergency extraction was Broken Arrow 66. I know because my brother was a communications specialist with the 160th SOAR. He told me all the JSOC codes before his deployment to Syria. I've been waiting for the right moment to tell you this, but I wanted you to know that I understood more about your world than I ever let on. Marcus stared at the postscript in shock. Broken Arrow 66 was indeed their unit's emergency extraction code, known only to their team and the helicopter pilots who supported their missions. Elena's brother had been killed in Syria 2 years earlier. She had mentioned losing a sibling but never provided details. Now he understood why she had been so determined to help him, why she had pushed so hard to break through his barriers. She hadn't just been doing her job as a nurse. She had been honoring her brother's memory by saving one of the warriors he had supported in combat. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes as the full magnitude of Elena's sacrifice and dedication became clear. She had risked her career, her professional reputation, and her emotional well-being to help him heal. And now she was uprooting her life to give them a chance at happiness together. 3 weeks later, as Marcus stood before his first class of SEAL candidates, he felt more nervous than he had before any combat mission. 20 young warriors sat before him, their eyes filled with the same determination and intensity he remembered from his own training days 20 years earlier. "Gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had lived through everything he was about to teach them. "My name is Marcus Rivera. I'm a former SEAL Team 6 operator, and I'm here to teach you about leadership in combat." He paused, noting the impressed expressions on several faces at the mention of SEAL Team 6. "Before we begin, I want to tell you about 6 men who taught me everything I know about being a warrior. Their names were David Hayes, Tom Brennan, Jake Morrison, Danny Vasquez, Luis Santos, and Mike Thompson. They died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan 6 months ago, and every lesson I teach you is dedicated to their memory." The room fell silent as Marcus continued, his voice steady but emotional. "Being a SEAL isn't just about being the strongest or the fastest or the most skilled with weapons. It's about making decisions when everything goes wrong. About taking care of your teammates when they can't take care of themselves, and about finding the strength to continue the mission even when the cost seems too high to bear." As he spoke, Marcus thought about Elena, who would be starting her new job in San Diego the following week. He thought about the journey they had both taken to arrive at this moment, the obstacles they had overcome, and the future they were building together. "The most important lesson I can teach you," Marcus concluded, "is that being a warrior means never giving up on your mission, on your teammates, or on yourself. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from the battles you win, but from the battles you refuse to lose." After class, as Marcus walked across the base toward his apartment, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number he had memorized but never called. "Elena Rodriguez," came the familiar voice that had guided him through his darkest hours. "It's Marcus," he said, feeling his heart race at the sound of her voice. "How did your first day go?" she asked, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Good," Marcus replied. "Yes? Broken Arrow 66 was the right code. Your brother saved my life more times than I can count. And now his sister has saved it again." There was a long pause before Elena spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "He would have liked you, you know. He always said the best warriors were the ones who fought not just for themselves, but for each other." "I love you," Marcus said, the words coming out before he could stop them. "I love you too," Elena replied without hesitation. "When can I see you?" Marcus smiled, looking out at the Pacific Ocean, where the sun was setting in brilliant shades of orange and gold. "How about dinner tomorrow? I know a place in San Diego." "It's a date," Elena said, and Marcus could hear the joy in her voice. As Marcus hung up the phone, he felt a sense of peace and completeness that had eluded him since that terrible night in Afghanistan. His brothers were gone, but their memory lived on in the lessons he would teach and the lives he would help shape. Elena was building a new life, dedicated to healing wounded warriors, continuing her brother's legacy in her own way. Together, they had found a way to transform their shared trauma into a force for good, proving that sometimes the greatest love stories are born not from easy circumstances, but from the courage to keep fighting when everything seems lost. The secret code that had once meant emergency extraction for Marcus's unit had become something else entirely. A symbol of the connection between two wounded souls who had found in each other the strength to believe in tomorrow. As he walked toward his new life, Marcus knew that he and Elena would face whatever challenges lay ahead together, united by love, purpose, and the unbreakable bonds forged in service to something greater than themselves.